Welcome. So, welcome to Sexual Alchemy with Dea Carr. Today we are here with Melissa Sagemiller Nesic. We are so happy to have you, Melissa.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. So, Melissa has been an actress for over 20 years, is that a couple decades in the industry, and has, as a mother, as a wellness expert, launched her own company with
my sister, actually.
With your sister,
yes.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. Relative Wellness.
Relative Wellness, which is integrative health coaching.
Yeah, we primarily it's holistic coaching, focusing on hormonal balance, gut issues, and women's health in general. Although I do see some men. It's not that I don't see men.
Discriminating,
it's just,
right? Excellent. But primarily female.
Primarily, yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to pause really quick just before we keep going. Can you hold it up higher? Because the connection, yes. And the cord, I'm still hearing a lot of feedback.
Okay.
Maybe.
Should I just keep
Yours
it here?
is fine. Yeah. I think that will be better. Yeah, because if you hold it down farther, it gets...
All right, I gotta.
And this is, are we like kind of referring back to the camera, or I see you looking at her?
I think
this is just kind of extraneous.
Okay.
So don't even worry about that.
Oh, I see.
It's
about
really
this.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can look
this
at me
is
if you want.
Right. I see you looking at her. That's fine.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Well, also I was just checking the sound, but ultimately this is just for us to put up on YouTube.
Yeah.
For just kind of extra.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll start again.
You can start over, or you can start from where you stopped. But you're welcome.
Are you okay to edit that then?
Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah, so we'll leave off where we were.
Yeah.
So you started this company with your sister how long ago?
About 2 years ago. She and I have always talked about our health issues, our family's health issues, our friends' health issues. We both have autoimmune issues as well as some hormonal issues. And she inspired me to get certified as a health coach. And we just were inspired to start this company to continue our work and helping those people in our lives that we love, as well as other women and men on the journey of health and self-discovery and self-care, really.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, especially in my 40s, I noticed that myself, as well as a lot of the women around me, were just depleted, exhausted.
Right.
Libidos were down, moods were all over the place, and anxiety and all of these issues that we were all bringing to our doctors, who, as helpful as they meant to be, just really weren't giving us the tools that we needed to help ourselves. So that really launched this fire within me and my sister to launch this company and help people just support their bodies so that they can heal themselves.
I love that you say support people to heal themselves. That is huge because it shifts the focus from looking outside yourself. And you said, I was looking on your website also talking about how ultimately the body wants to heal itself, that the body is seeking ways to heal itself. Right. And so finding holistic tools in order for the body to do what it wants to do.
Right. I mean, look,
which is such a different approach, may I say?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Well, then a lot of Western medicine, right? That there has to be this
right.
outside force coming in.
Right. Well, and also, look, we're in Los Angeles. The wellness community is exponentially just infinite in a way, and across the country and the world, it's becoming bigger and bigger. But which is great, but along with that comes a lot of overwhelming information that people are bombarded with on social media, and which supplements do I take, and I should be doing this, and I should be doing that, but I heard that I should be eating this, and the paleo people say this, and the vegan people say this. There's just a lot of information out there, but what fundamentally I come back to with myself and my clients is that what you touched upon, our bodies are the supercomputers of the universe, okay? And, forget about, this, I heard this yogi talking about it actually the other night, forget about the iPhone, it's the eye. That is the most powerful thing. And when we tap into that and just give it a little bit of help and support, it will lean towards the sun and heal itself. So it's about, kind of wading through a lot of the information, finding, what works for you and your internal power as a woman, and or man, and going with that and trusting.
That's beautiful. I love, so when we first met, I mentioned that I was a Kundalini yoga teacher, and I was so excited by your response because you were so enthusiastic, having practiced Kundalini yoga yourself, having used it prenatal, right?
Yes, and even before that, when I first moved to LA, actually, a dear childhood friend of mine had been living out here, Kathy Farkas, and she brought me to Golden Bridge.
Okay.
When it was on 3rd Street.
Right.
And I went to a class, I went to Gurmukh's class, and I went once, and I was doing some crazy stuff, kangaroo, where we were kangaroos, and we were shaking our tushies, and we were, on all fours and hopping around.
Those days, yes.
And, but I loved it. And then it wasn't till 9/11 that, everything imploded in our lives, really, and I came straight back to Golden Bridge because I didn't know what else to do with myself and my feelings and my nerves, and it helped me just recenter in such a huge way, and then from there I just always came back to it, and then went through my 2 babies, using Kundalini.
So I love that you mentioned the nerves, because what Kundalini specifically works on, as opposed to other types of yoga, which are much more muscular and skeletal based, Kundalini is about the glandular and the nervous system, balancing those things.
Totally.
So it makes sense. I mean, I was so pleased with your enthusiastic response to it. I said, I love Kundalini yoga. It saved me many times in my life, which I've heard that so many times from people, that what it offers is ultimately, to me, an opportunity for you to go back to yourself, to go back to your center, to reset, to realize there is nothing between you and God. Ultimately, when you close your eyes and focus on your breath and align, it's all there for you. Problem is, we get so much clutter in the way of ourselves that we forget, right? And so when I teach, I always describe Kundalini yoga as a remembering, and as Yogi Bhajan put it, when you meditate, you basically are taking out the mental garbage, right? That you're clearing out all those things that keep you out of that feeling of alignment. And that's the simplicity of it. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And then there's all different ways that it helps heal your glandular and your nervous system. So I wanted to ask you a little more about what you've learned in your journey about hormones and the glandular system, and what you can share.
So, so going back to where I came from, and why Kundalini was a crucial step and a bridge to my healing journey, and still is, as other yoga practices are, but Kundalini I always come back to. At a young age, I had some childhood trauma, and that kind of sank into my body. And, as we all know, because most people experience trauma at one point in their lives, it comes out as anxiety, or actually as physical symptoms at any point in your life. I also was probably hormonally imbalanced from age, from the time I started menstruating, because of, I was raised what I like to say, and I love you, Mom, but white flour, sugar, and antibiotics. Yep. And it just, especially with my my microbiome and my foundation, it really created this very unstable health situation. From 13, I mean, now that I look back on it, I was, my period, I was getting PMS from almost like day one, which is not, that's one of the things that I've learned, the more I study and learn and and listen to my teachers that talk about hormonal health and women's health is that PMS is not normal. Everyone thinks it's normal, but it's not. You know, for you to feel bad right before your periods
is not necessary.
It's not necessary,
right.
and it's not normal.
That we have taken it as like that's just what you have to deal with.
Right? Yeah. Like, oh, my period. Yeah, the curse. I mean, there's so many things that it's been named.
And what would you
know? And Kundalini can actually really help. And I think Yogi Bhajan. I mean, I remember I have several of his workbooks talking about how to, heal and redirect the energy or the imbalance of energy during the menses, and PMS and whatnot. So that was always really helpful to me.
Right.
Some of the breathing exercises they do, the cooling of...
Yeah. And also the way that Kundalini Yoga really honors the moon cycle as this powerful time in a woman's life, that it really, I think it is interesting how our culture kind of washes it off, that like we just have carry on like little troopers, we go out and we forge out into the world as if we are not going through this powerful time, and there's a way to honor that, I think, without putting a stigma on it, right?
Definitely. It's one of the only yoga practices that actually you will call out, for
and
those women that are on their moon, that are on their moon cycle.
I'm on my moon cycle.
Here's the adjustment,
cool.
Don't lift both legs up, or don't do the breath of fire, and a lot of the other yoga practices out there, they don't even acknowledge that, or they don't. I mean, maybe if you come up to the practitioner, before they, oh yes, so just I'll let you know,
right.
But it's still kind of like this shameful, not shameful, but like let's just keep it under wraps, and I won't announce it to the class.
Yeah. Whereas in Kundalini it is proactively addressed. Yeah. Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And celebrated.
Yeah. And it should be.
Yeah.
Why not? Right?
Yeah, why not? I mean, the shame around menstruation is an interesting topic that I think we've all participated in unwillingly or willingly. I mean, I have 2 sons, and I have actually caught myself hiding my period from them because they're too young. I don't want to gross them out.
Traumatize them.
Yeah, I don't want them to kind of look upon what happens with a woman as a disgusting thing. I'm going to wait until the right moment. But what I was doing was kind of participating in that shame and that hiding and that. So I had a kind of like real comeuppance moment with myself about that, and how I should present menstruation to my sons, and it was a very kind of life lesson. It was an interesting life lesson.
Right, because you have to in some ways undo what's been done to you, and shame that you've taken on subconsciously. Right. And that's the thing too, is to normalize it is the way of taking off the shock of it, right? So then it doesn't become this, oh, guess what? Right. Women bleed, and that if they know from an early age, inappropriate, boundary related ways, that this is something that happens every month to a normal, healthy woman between the ages of blah, 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 and that this is part of why we have life on this planet, is because a woman has this menstruation and has this ability to create life in her womb. Right. And we shouldn't suppress that. And I think, this gets into a whole other discussion about suppressing ovulation and the pill and the effects of that. And talk about that. But before even going down that road, talking about celebrating sort of the rituals of your body, and taking back the control to a certain extent of your health. That's another reason why I got into what I'm doing now, is that for me, being an actress in a very high pressure job, traveling all the time, working 18-hour days a lot of times, burning the candle at both ends. And then when the kids came into play and I was still kind of doing that, it became unsustainable because of the way I was living my life and treating my health. And even as health conscious as I was buying into what I think a lot of people, unfortunately, in this day and age, and we're all victim to it, is this unsustainably
go attitude about, well, which is Western life, right?
Sure, yeah.
Constantly on the phone, constantly
and
on the
busy
screen.
equates successful, right?
Busy yes.
Busy makes us validated in some way.
Right. And women have an even harder, because think about what we're sort of up against. We have to be busy, be successful, be moms, be rulers of the house, be everyone's comforter, and go out and, knock them dead in the office or career and do it all.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we do that? Can you have it all, lean in, the whole thing? I mean, that's the constant kind of discussion. But so this unsustainable lifestyle and the effects that it has on women's health, everyone's health, but what I focus on in women's health is something that I am constantly working with, and in my workshops and with my clients, and how to create more of a balance, and how to get in touch with your health and empower yourself to heal yourself, and how to take a step back, and there's a book called Women Code that I base a lot of my practice on, by Melissa Vitti, Vitti, and she talks a lot about it's all about working with your cycle, working with your hormones, not working against them, not ignoring them, not shoving them, down into the cupboard while you go off and conquer the world like a man, but using your feminine energy to empower yourself and draw upon that as a strength, not as a weakness.
So I love that. That's amazing. Because there has been, I think we have been trying to fit ourselves into a patriarchal model of what is normal, and what defines powerful, and what defines successful. And I think what we're talking about, and what my goal in this podcast is to empower the feminine into realizing that is a power structure in and of itself. What is feminine is the ultimate power. We are the life givers. We are the nurturers. We are that support system. And the more ways that we can model that as powerful will help shift that paradigm, will help shift the perspective of that we don't have to try to emulate men to create a model of empowerment for our daughters and for our sons, right? As mothers of sons, it's giving them an example of a woman who is a woman, not with huge shoulder pads. I always think about that in the 80s, that women in different movies in the 80s, like Fatal Attraction and stuff, the woman in the workplace was the monster, right? In that movie in particular. And the idea that the woman is powerful when she's like a man, right? And so what if a woman is a woman in all ways, and that is a whole different type of definition of power, and recognizing our hormonal health is so important to that, because like you mentioned, if I may get back to the birth control pills. Now, this is a controversial subject. We heard this talked about a lot at this wellness expo that we went to, with different gynecologists talking about opinions about it. Now, on one hand, from a feminist perspective, the birth control pill gave women an enormous freedom in terms of having autonomy over their own body, having a say over when they reproduce. That is a huge shift in cultural norm, right? Yeah. So the invention of the birth control pill in one way gave women this enormous leg up. Unfortunately, what we're finding, from my understanding, is that it does kind of, like to your point, pretend that the menstrual cycle isn't there, right? It kind of shuts down the normal regulation of hormones. Is that your stance?
It convinces your body that it's pregnant. It suppresses ovulation. Right. And in many cases, which is what I experienced, hormonal issues are kind of masked with the pill.
Were you on the pill?
I was on the pill for 10 years.
Yeah, I was for almost 20.
Almost 20? 20. Yeah. Now, while I was on it, once I found the right kind of one, it was pretty great. I didn't have heavy periods. Right. I didn't have a ton of PMS. Once I went off it, though, at age 26 was when everything went haywire.
Interesting.
You know?
Right? Yeah.
Because it had been masking all of my imbalances
Sure.
for so long, and then my body didn't even know.
Is it fair to say also you don't know the chicken from the egg? Like you don't
Right.
know if those were there or if they were a
Right.
result of your
Right.
body suppressing your normal.
It could be both. It could be, like I said, I think looking back to before I was on the pill, I was having cramps and PMS issues that, you know, now if I could go back in time and health coach my 13, 14-year-old self, you know, if I just made some dietary changes and maybe introduce a supplement or two or a multivitamin and enrich some of my micronutrients and minerals, I could have easily balanced that out.
Right.
But I went on the pill and didn't do any of that because we didn't know about any of that.
And that's what I was
stuff,
going to
you
say.
know?
Like, bless our moms, but like, the food that we ate back then, we were
bologna and sugar-filled yogurt was considered a really healthy meal.
Cakes, devil dogs,
preserves. Plus, we as children of the 70s are coming in as as really the first generation where a lot of our food was laden with preservatives, refined processed foods, you know, coming out of the 50s and 60s.
And pesticides.
And heavy metals from those pesticides and from like a lot of the
fillings,
chemicals that were
too,
the DEET or you know, that was dumped on all the vegetation to get rid of the mosquitoes and the fillings. I mean, you could go on, and then the plastics and all of that. And that's another thing I tell my clients and the people that I do these powwows with. It's obviously really overwhelming when you kind of break it down and all the toxins that we're being bombarded with. But you can start, you know, small. You can just, you know, let's change all of my containers in the fridge to glass. Let's start with that. And then let's change my house cleaners to, you know, some healthy cleaner, more natural-based, plant-based cleaners. So that's two things I would say do first, you know, and then you build. So because that can induce anxiety to walk around and feel like I can't breathe the air, I can't eat this food, this packaging, this, and then the guilt of the
then
climate,
it gets a little OCD, or it just gets like, forget it, screw it, I can't do anything.
Right, and if you're stressed
I'm
out,
fighting an uphill battle, I can't win.
then if you're stressed out, you can eat all the kale and quinoa in the world. You're gonna get some disease because of the stress and anxiety levels. So, you know, anyways, so the pill, going back to the pill, getting off it, going into sort of hormonal hyperdrive, and that also really launched my journey to figure out what was going on, because every time I was feeling like shit right after I went off the pill, I'd go to my doctors, and they would say, no, your tests are coming out great. Your thyroid tests are coming out great. Your hormone tests are coming out great. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. And I was having gut issues. I was, you know, and so then you start to think you're going crazy, or you're a hypochondriac. Or
just a hysterical female.
Or hysterical female.
It's a good word, hysterical.
Right? Hysterical. Hysterectomy, right?
Word, hysterical.
Yeah. But instead, I just started doing my own research. I found this book at Whole Foods, I remember, and that was my first in on using food as medicine, and then going to probiotics from there, and then going to gluten and just the issues with gluten that I have, and I think a lot of people have some sort of degree of sensitivity towards it. But then, and just the power I got from then seeing results that I was producing by myself, and then wanting to spread the word to everyone I knew, because I wanted to help people. I wanted to save them the trouble that I was going through, with like going to doctor and getting frustrated and spending all that money on some alternative treatments that were kind of not helpful, and maybe going for the ones that are helpful, but also taking the power into your own reins by just food choices, lifestyle tweaks, and, you know, adding in some supplements, which is really what it's all about.
Right. I love your approach so much that it really is empowering people to heal themselves, because that is really what I try to I speak a lot about that when I teach, that this is ultimately a tool for you to heal and balance yourself, for you to bring yourself back to sanity, bring yourself back to whole health. Because too often we are searching for the answer outside ourselves, right? We're hoping that there's going to be some expert, right? That the doctor knows better than we. We often, as women, that's something in my journey, looking for both a gynecologist as well as a pediatrician. I fell in love with my pediatrician because he said, at the end of the day, I know that as a mother, no matter what I know as a medical professional, a mother's instinct is always right. And I was like, oh, done, we're signed up. Like, you're my man, you're my doctor.
Wow.
And he said, because you have that internal radar, that intuition to that child that nobody else has. So he says, when a mother tells me, I just have a feeling, he's like, get in.
Get in.
And isn't that so much that we need to hear then that we're not often getting, right? That we need to have permission to trust ourselves.
To trust you and
That's
listen
the
to
message.
yourself.
Yeah.
Check in with yourself.
Right.
Meditate.
Right.
Meditation, that's a big thing, right? Is going back and trusting yourself. Again, I'm going to reference, our current state of affairs with social media and all of this wellness information that's coming to us all the time, and yogic lifestyle information. You need to calm down, you need to do this, you need to meditate this many minutes a day, and it's you're constantly kind of feeling like
shaming.
I'm not doing enough, I'm not enlightened enough, I'm not healthy enough, I don't look like her, gosh, I'm not eating like him.
We're all trying to out enlighten each other.
Right.
It's really
silly game. I like cookies just like everyone else. So it's all about balance and not going too overboard in one direction, but really, I think something, was it Charlize Theron or another amazing movie star woman, her name will come into my head, but everyone was fawning over the way that she's aged, and she's just kind of, and what do you do, and what do you eat, and she just kind of said it like it was, like, well, I eat what feels good. I don't eat what makes me feel like crap, and I take care of myself, and I drink some water, and it was like 3 things, it's always the simplest things that we forget.
We do think that we can't possibly be that simple,
right? But that
would mean that I can't be a victim then,
right? Or I can't blame it on someone else, or I can't say
latch on to a new trend that
because that becomes an obsession, that becomes an addiction. Totally. The next cleanse, the next this, I'm not, clean enough, and this, and I'm not gooped out enough. I love goop, but you know what I mean? It's all kind of unattainable, and it's really all about bringing it back.
Because even those, I think the point being too, even the most holistic ideology can start to feel like shame when it's taken from, it's all about intention, right? So if you're coming from this space of lack, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not healthy enough, I'm fat, I'm not good by whatever standard, then whatever you're seeking from that vibration is only going to continue to perpetuate that vibration. So it really does have to become, to your point, when you're meditating and you become clear in what it is I really want to create, and then you amplify that rather than what you want to get rid of, right? Then you're amplifying the negative.
And amplifying,
chiming in with some deep snores.
He's got some thoughts on that. But it's about your inner dialogue, right? What's going on in your mind if you're constantly, and I think, everyone does this, but being a woman, a woman in a kind of a very hyper stressed out, goal-oriented, success obsessed world that we've all come from and are products of. Think about what that does to your inner dialogue, to yourself. Even the gurus and the enlightened people, we all have to work on that, right? So it's about doing that and checking in and kind of taking those moments and creating that space for yourself and for your body and for your health, because you can say, I'm going to do this, I'll do it next week, but I was motivated to do it because I started, literally my body started kind of falling apart.
Right.
And that's the messages it was giving me.
Right. And there was the gift in a way,
Right.
which didn't feel like a gift at the time.
No.
But yeah. And then, okay,
Yeah.
what am I going to do about this?
What
and
am I
then
gonna
you
do
start
about
to
Right.
proactively
Right.
seek answers.
Right.
So this is ultimately a sexuality podcast too. So we really do want to honor the space of the sacred in sexuality and ultimately the divine feminine. So we were talking a little bit beforehand about how often our culture is these two extremes, that we have this still repressive attitude that we get all uptight about, J-Lo being sexy at 50 in her Mardi Gras looking outfit. And then we have, so that's the repressive side. And then we have this extreme version of pornography at our fingertips at any moment that we now have to, I live in
Guard our
terror
children
that
from,
my
yeah.
children are going to be, that anything is at a click away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So my goal in creating this continual conversation with people is, how do we as human beings, as women, as men, as mothers, as fathers, talk about sexuality in a healthy way? How do we get to really honor and express the sacred connection that healthy, love-based sexuality creates? And I would like you to talk about that a little bit from whatever perspective you'd like to share, but also from hormonal and women dealing with changing hormones as they grow older as well.
Well, yes, where do I start? So, your relationship with your sexuality begins when you're a baby, right? But as you move forward in your human form, and as a woman, your relationship with your body, changes. And you go from being kind of very assertive, sassy 8-year-old and 9-year-old to a kind of timid, more insecure 11 and 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And then from there, menstruation comes into play, introducing a whole flood of feelings and sensations and some shame, as we were talking about, confusion. And let's stop right there and talk about how we as mothers and women can really change the dialogue on all of that with our young girls, and taking ownership of their periods and their bodies and their voices, really, and listening to their bodies. But going forward, taking control of your sexuality and treating it as a sacred thing. I definitely did not. When I was bombarded with MTV. Okay, that's what I was obsessed with as a tween and a teen, and then being like kind of a pretty blonde girl, there were a lot of messages being thrown at me about that, and how pretty I was, and I guess I'm this pretty girl that's supposed to adhere to these kind of norms and this way of acting, and then being an actress on top of that, and using your sexuality in your roles, but feeling the male gaze constantly, as well as the audience's gaze, and then kind of trying to deal with that.
Yeah, and I want to go back to a little bit to what you said about that pivot point between when a girl around 9 years old has this innate confidence, because she's experiencing herself as a whole being. And that's something that's really important, and it makes me almost want to cry. But she's experiencing who she really is in that moment. What happens, I think energetically, on a subtle level, but it's so profound, is when the shift comes to when she starts to develop and she starts to go through puberty. There's so many studies done on this, that her self-confidence plummets. That's something that is so key. Why is it once a girl, a female being, starts to see herself through the lens of sexual in this culture, does her self-esteem decline? And then conversely, what you talked about too, and then if you're validated as sexual, right? If you're deemed attractive sexually, that then your self-esteem plummets in a very precarious way. Yes.
Your fathers are telling you and kind of afraid of your newfound sexuality.
Very much so. Yes.
You know, oh gosh, you know, I'm scared for when it's always, I'm scared when my daughter turns 15. I'm scared. Oh, yeah. You know, it shouldn't be scary. It should be celebrated
because
and
they're
supported.
recognizing that they're in a culture where that is dangerous.
Right. Yeah. It should be celebrated, supported, guided, because they need guidance.
For sure.
That, you know, this burgeoning, these thoughts and these feelings and these, you know, instincts. Right. And, you know, there needs to be a lot of education going on. But the fear and the shame and the kind of the repression, really, of it, or suppression of this power that's happening in us, that's where all of these conflicting messages start to happen in these young girls. And they kind of, coupled with, it is in our DNA as our sex, as women, we operate in a community, in a communal environment. We gain power and information through eye contact and speaking in our community. That's how women, that's why we develop eye contact as babies, whereas the male species can look for a certain amount of time but then has to look away. Yeah. Because this is how we gain our information and our and how we breathe, basically, as humans. So women then tend to, when the hormones start to kick in, if they're misled and misguided in their communication with their tribe, with their women tribe, then it becomes, I'm comparing myself to you. Right. I want to be just like you, and not me. And that's what the communication lines start to look like. And it's very natural. Everyone does that. I'm not saying, it's just that when that is sort of, when girls are kind of running with that and not guided in that more, okay, you know, yes, I see you comparing yourself to those other women, and those boys, but, you know, also realize what the intrinsic value you have, and just constantly reinstilling that. They might not get it at first, but it will hopefully go into their inner dialogue and change that, you know.
Yeah. Well, and so much of that messaging is subconscious too, right? So it's like, it's just all the little ways that it starts to build and gradually starts to inform the identity.
Right. So I'll take it from there and sort of stop on the being an actress with all of the sexuality, and then what I experienced with my
well, if I may, being on the forefront of the Me Too movement, which is enormously important. I want to touch on here because that was really a demarcation for us culturally, that we suddenly started to all look around at something we all knew was happening, and then we all started to look at each other and say, "Oh, it happened to you too." Yeah, that we all, on some level, accepted it as normal, and then we finally collectively said, wait a minute, we don't actually have to put up with this anymore. And I want to acknowledge you for being one of the people on the front lines of that. Like, it's huge that you were able to take a stand in the way that you did in an industry that put up with it for far too long. And then often by Hollywood, there goes the rest of the world, that we've set a certain standard by being so visible, right? That a lot of other people looked at it and go, well, yeah, that's happening in my industry as well.
Yeah, hopefully the dominoes are falling, or we've begun this transformation, this movement, this progression towards all women, you know, of all different professions and races and living
and
situations,
socioeconomic.
That's really the ultimate goal here. It kind of started in Hollywood and in other areas, but yeah. So as an actress, I was introduced very early on in my career to scenarios where I was having to deal with men, this toxic masculinity, this toxic workplace, and men who were preying upon actresses, and also young women who were working for them as assistants or writers and agents. I mean, it happened in all areas of the business. And one of them was Harvey Weinstein.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
So, and like you said, the sort of the tragic truth of it all was that you were just expected to grin and bear it, turn it into a joke, and move on, and not talk to anyone about it. Or if you were talked about it, it was like, oh, can you believe this happened to me? Ha 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 ha. Move on. Like, don't make waves. Don't make trouble.
Right. That it was very much accepted as just matter of fact.
Yeah.
This is what you deal with.
And that was so great about the Me Too movement, and what Rose McGowan and Ashley Judd, when they first started speaking out, because they were some of the very first, in that it just made us all look at ourselves. And after I spoke out and say, I just remember having a conversation with my mom about it, telling her, look, I'll be out in this Vanity Fair article and this Huffington Post article in a day.
Wow.
And telling her what I was talking about. And it really even wasn't until I was talking to my mom. I'd already done the interview.
All right.
But when I was talking to my mom, it sank in, and I said out loud, and it wasn't okay for them to be doing things like that to us.
Right.
And it, just complete sadness and trauma, re-triggering,
Sure.
but so cathartic and so much healing.
Yeah.
And then for the women, really what was the beautiful thing about it all was the women that were coming up to me afterwards for months, telling me their stories.
Yeah. Wow.
And they had never spoken any of this out loud.
Right.
And that was a beautiful thing. And
Well, and any chance we get as human beings to unveil the truth, we are doing an enormous service to the collective, right? So you gave, by telling your truth, which took enormous courage, which I don't imagine you haven't gotten plenty of pushback from, to some degree, right? There's the things that
They're the
exist,
naysayers,
the status quo does not want to be called out.
No.
It does not want to change often.
No.
So it requires enormous courage, as well as healing from past pains. But to your point too, is that the predatory nature of that toxic masculinity, right? That acts as if the female is something to be consumed, right? To be preyed upon, is what we're talking about. We're not talking about normal dynamics between a man and woman and someone interested pursuing someone else. That's a totally different dynamic. This is a very unbalanced playing field with someone with an enormous power who's using that to manipulate and control in a very sleazy way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, people in
Over
power
and over and over.
Right.
Again.
It comes from the top down. I mean, you could argue both. It comes from the top down. It also comes from the bottom up, though. What we started hearing was that even in the lower levels of these studios and organizations and agencies, that it was happening with the assistants and the interns on that level, because they're looking also at the powers that be, if they're getting away with it, or this is acceptable behavior, and this is what, when you make it big, this is how you act.
Get to do,
right,
to some degree,
right. They're all doing it, at every level. Right. So my hope is that that we obviously have enabled women to feel more confident in coming forward with their stories, and also just forwarding this movement of what do we do next? Who do we help next? Where can we go and make the most impact?
And because the truth is that this isn't a woman versus man thing. That this is ultimately, when we heal this energy, we heal the masculine as well. That we heal the way that we interrelate. That this doesn't have to be this kind of power struggle and this kind of ugliness, where the men in our lives, I think ultimately when they are healed, recognize that they are to fathers, and they are brothers, and they are friends to women, and that if you wouldn't want something done to your daughter, you probably shouldn't be doing it to other women. Right?
Well, we're all, and I think Kundalini deals with that. We're all masculine, feminine, right? We're all kind of spheres of both energies, and it's when that becomes imbalanced. And I think right now the world is kind of imbalanced a little bit, between the masculine and the feminine. The masculine's kind of been pushing down the feminine for a while, like we were talking about. Hopefully the age of Aquarius is upon us, so the feminine is rising.
It's getting a little rocky.
It's rising, yeah, we're waiting on that.
Yeah, anyway.
But it is happening. We are seeing a lot of great stuff happening. But yeah, I wrote an article about being a mother of sons during this movement and how it affected me in a different way because of that. Because I was looking at the male psyche and the male heart,
how it's formed, right? Because as mothers, we have an enormous responsibility in that.
And you can't throw out the men, even the men that have done harm. To a certain extent, there needs to be consequences and retribution. I'm not saying that, but what do we do with all of these men that have acted in these ways? Yeah. I mean, because it's a complex and a layered conversation. You can go into the criminal justice system as well, and that and the faults with that. You don't just throw away people that have effed up, right? I mean, you need to rehabilitate. And it needs to start at a young age.
Right. And also, from a sociological standpoint, recognize where the wound formed.
Right.
Because that wound is often significant of the collective, right? That did not exist within a vacuum.
Right.
That there's a system that created that. When we're seeing that perpetuated over and over and over again, as we've now recognized with the Me Too movement. I mean, you talk about people like Bill Cosby, for example, that we all thought was he was America's dad, right? Mm-hmm. And then to realize what in fact he was doing is so horrific.
Violating to all of us,
it's
really.
It's so deeply disturbing. And so then how do we, as a collective, process that? I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But truly, that these people that we put in these positions of power and trust have been betraying it from the second chakra, from the sacred. The sacral chakra is called that because it is a sacred space. And that is really ultimately what my goal in having these conversations is, to heal that and heal that collectively by conscious conversation, by looking in each other's eyes, by connecting, and by saying, when we know better, we do better. And hopefully as we as parents will raise the next generation of conscious men and women who will start to shift this. So we could talk obviously for all day, but I'm so honored that you took the time today to talk with us and share your thoughts and all your knowledge. Is there a place that we can go to find more information if someone wanted coaching with you? What is your website?
Sure. HighRelativeWellness.com, or you can follow me and DM me on Insta at High Relative Wellness. And I do private coaching sessions, and I do group coaching sessions, which is actually a really fun thing, to get a group of women together and have a glass of wine or some tea, and it's like group health therapy, basically.
I love that. I think we should do one with a little Kundalini yoga, and we'll get one going here in LA together. That would be cool. Melissa Sagemiller Nesic, thank you so much for being with us today.